Hello everyone, I'm Joseph Giunta, the music director and conductor of the Des Moines Symphony, and I welcome you to another listening room. Today I'm going to speak about the music on our final concert of the season to be held on May 11th and 12th in the Civic Center of Greater Des Moines. We're calling it Rediscover the Ode to Joy. And that's a real giveaway about what we're going to be playing. Of course, we're speaking about the Beethoven glorious Ninth Symphony. But before I get to that, let's start at the beginning of the program. The program begins with a piece that exemplifies Viennese musical life in the 1800s, Franz von Suppe's Pique Overture. This is a delightful and perfectly charming piece that will musically display the spirit and fun and lightheartedness of living in the city of dreams and music in the 1800s. And then we follow this with a perfect companion piece to Beethoven's immortal Ninth Symphony, a work written by living American composer Valerie Coleman. It's called UMOJA, a Swahili word meaning unity. Valerie is a composer and a flutist and wrote the work over 20 years ago for her woodwind quintet. But in 2019, she was asked to write an orchestral version of it, and it was premiered by the Philadelphia Orchestra in September of 2019. The work represents a full exploration of freedom and unity, very similar to Beethoven's testament of brotherhood for all mankind. Now more than ever, UMOJA rings as a strong and beautiful and powerful anthem for the world we live in today. Now, every time I conduct Beethoven's masterpiece, it underscores the lasting impact of his genius. It continues to attract large audiences all over the world, and next month, I suspect even more people will hear the piece because we are celebrating the 200th anniversary of its first performance, which was on May 7th of 1824. And just allow me to take a second to set the scene for that performance. Beethoven at that time was one of the most popular Viennese composers of the day, a rank he achieved by surpassing Mozart. However, at this point in his life, his decades of popularity in Vienna and all over the world were slightly overshadowed by the hugely entertaining opera composer, Rossini. And of course, this disturbed Beethoven very much. During this time, Beethoven was completely deaf, and he hadn't written anything for orchestra in over 10 years. He had little money, and his commissioning fee from the London Philharmonic, a pittance of £50, did not even come close to the enormous expense of composing this monumental work, let alone producing it. And the production costs itself were fraught with frustrations for the composer and performances alike. This was the birth and the setting of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Now, his Ninth Symphony had a gestation period of over 30 years, and it all started when he read Schiller's Ode to Joy. Then he started sketching pieces shortly after that, and around 1815, we saw some music in his sketchbooks, and finally the score was finished about 1824. Now, Schiller's poem was just full of hopes and expectations for the future, very positive, and it was written a little bit before the French Revolution. The meaning in this poem and how the world actually turned out during Beethoven's lifetime was very different. But from the beginning, Beethoven's vision was clear. He wanted to write a revolutionary work, a work that was conflicted and tempestuous and reflective, and finally expressing his profound love of his fellow man. These feelings culminated throughout his life into one of the most significant works of art ever created, a testament to universal brotherhood. This was Beethoven's way of changing the world, and he obviously did. The influence that Beethoven had on those that followed him were unprecedented. Tchaikovsky wrote that Beethoven's music was colossal and titanic, and composed his Fourth Symphony with Beethoven's own Fifth Symphony in mind. Wagner thought Beethoven's Ninth Symphony held the secrets of all secrets, and copied every note of it over a period of about 5 years. Mahler was profoundly moved by Beethoven's music. Berlioz thought Beethoven's Ninth was the culmination of his genius. Shostakovich wrote that Beethoven gave new and revolutionary ideas to the public and rose it to revolt against its masters. And even Stravinsky, who was outspoken early in his life about not liking Beethoven's music, later, when he was in his 80s, was converted. He wrote, "I find new and newfound joy in Beethoven these days." Now, anyone whose heart beats warmly for greatness and beauty will surely be present, was written in a Viennese newspaper on May 5th, 1824, 2 days before this much anticipated concert, which included Beethoven's consecration of the House Overture, several movements of the Missa Solemnis, and the premiere of his Ninth Symphony. Now, the first performance, conducted by Beethoven himself, although he couldn't hear one note of the piece, was by all accounts miserable. It was hastily prepared and under-rehearsed. Reviews spoke of poor intonation, lack of finesse and execution, and very weak playing. The music was so difficult for some of the string players that they often put their bows down in protest of the music being difficult. And the first movement begins with a sinister and mysterious feeling murmuring in the strings. There's no time, only space. The horns and the violins, they enter very softly, and as more instruments join in, you have this first culmination of the theme that's absolutely unparalleled in its emotional content. It's played in full voice at fortissimo, the loudest the orchestra can play. There's a double exposition, meaning the exposition is played twice, and two other development sections, each moving into a harmonic world like no other has ever been. The coda builds to a huge climax, and when I conduct it, I always feel like the piece could end right then. The second movement, Wagner called a miracle of repetition in monotony, which refers to the incessant da-da-da-da-da-da-da, which is played delicately and elegantly and charmingly and boldly and even sometimes cumbersomely, but always very effective. His third movement is marked Adagio molto e cantabile. It's a stunningly beautiful and reflective music that seems to come just from another world. The winds are prominent throughout all this, and the fluidity of the first violins is similar to that of the Italian bel canto style that became so popular later in the century. This movement ends peacefully with no hint whatsoever of what's to come. Now, Wagner called the opening of this last movement a fanfare of terror. It opens with a dissonance of two triads played simultaneously, B-flat major and D minor. And what follows is a drama heard like never before or since. The lower strings play operatic-type recitatives, and the music of the previous three movements appears as if to remind us where we've been before we get to something brand new. And then something unheard of. Beethoven adds 4 solo voices and a wonderful choir in a combination with a full symphony orchestra. It's much like an opera or a concerto. There's a Turkish march and a double fugue, and all of this make it to one of the most innovative and expressive works of art ever created. The question that I always ask myself as I'm studying this piece and preparing it, how did it become so exalted over time? Certainly the first performance of it did not merit immediate success. If Wagner hadn't championed it in 1872, who knows? It might have been forgotten. But this celebratory and historic performance was memorable, and the piece started to be programmed by prominent conductors of the day, and even Mahler, who conducted it for many significant occasions in Vienna and in the early 1900s, and since then, it's actually been cemented in place as the perfect piece for epic historic events. Leonard Bernstein conducted it for the raising of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Simon Rattle performed it with the Vienna Philharmonic at a concentration camp in Austria for the 177th anniversary of its premiere, it has become a symbol for international events all over the world. My experience with the piece is that each and every performer and listener walks away believing that all could be well with the world. And that, of course, is what makes this so special. And after all, isn't that at least one definition of great art? Well, I look forward to seeing you in May for the Beethoven 9th, and what a season finale this is going to be. You'll not want to miss one note of this, and I look forward to seeing you then.